Lawyers, has there ever been a time the opposing counsel accidentally proved your case for you? And what happened? Story 1. A witness on the stand was claiming that he had suffered injuries to his arm because of a city bus accident. Jerry asked him to demonstrate to the jury how far he could lift his arm after the accident. The witness makes a feeble effort to lift his arm. Then Jerry asked the witness to demonstrate to the jury how far he could lift his arm before the accident. He lifts his arm much higher. The jury laughs, and the case is over. Story 2. Domestic violence case where the husband beat the wife senseless. The landlord tried to evict the wife for breach of lease due to the beating. The landlord claimed that the wife violated lease terms by allowing police to be called to the property and causing a disruption. My argument was that as a domestic violence victim, the wife is covered under VAWA, and the property is HUD subsidized. Also, MD Laws offers DV protections too. Landlord's counsel during his opening talked about how my client was beaten and the police were called and an ambulance, etc. I just stood there looking at him. When he finished, the judge asked if I had anything to say. My response is, "No, Your Honor, I believe opposing counsel has said everything that needs to be said." The judge smiled and ruled in my client's favor. Story 3. I had to go to court over a financial cock-up when I was a student. I took advice from the university's legal support team, which said I didn't need a lawyer, so I went in alone. The judge didn't like this and postponed it for another date so I could prove I've had more counsel first. The other party's solicitor caught me outside the court and said, "I didn't tell you this, but," and pointed out a huge error in the financial paperwork that made it very obviously it would come out in my favor. Went back to legal support, got confirmation that it was right, went to the second hearing alone, and got the entire thing thrown out. The other solicitor winked at me as he left. He saved me about £9,000. Story 4. I worked as an intern for a lawyer. Construction laws in France are quite strict with regard to the neighboring of historical monuments. The city was denying a permit for heavy modification of the house of our clients. They were arguing that because you could see the house from the church's bell tower, modifications were impossible. As a gesture of support, they kindly linked us to a 360-degree picture from said bell tower. We as kindly pointed out to them that our client's house was indeed not visible from the top of the church. A building permit was granted the following day. Story 5. When I first started, my firm had me on a case where the client claimed he lost because of ineffective assistance from counsel. Basically, I'm saying that the old lawyer didn't do his job. So we prepare an argument based on not asking the right questions, not communicating, etc. We think it's going to be a tough case, but not unwinnable. Then we get the response to our complaint, where the old lawyer argues that he was only ineffective because he didn't have time to prepare for the case and only reviewed it the morning of the original trial. He had known about the case for months, by the way. The judge saw this, and during the trial, we essentially asked, "Isn't this the definition of ineffective counsel? Not giving enough time to your client?" The silence from his side of the court was amazing. Needless to say, the trial didn't last much longer than that. Thanks, opposing counsel. I guess you were ineffective for both of you. Story 6. When I first started practicing, I handled a custody case where my client, mom, had a problem with dad smoking around the kids. I asked him if he regularly smoked around the kids, to which he replied that he doesn't smoke tobacco, only weed in the house. Obviously, this raised eyebrows as it is illegal in my state. He then went into a long diatribe about how he only follows the laws of the streets. He actually said this, and doesn't recognize the authority of the court he was currently in front of. Needless to say, Mom got full custody, especially after Dad was arrested for going to the court services officer's house late at night and trying to kick her door in. Story 7. My opposing counsel made some off-the-cuff remarks about how their client had to go to another remote office to get all the records they wanted to use against my client. That let me know the witness they were trying to use to introduce the record as evidence wasn't actually familiar with the records or the record-keeping process. In the jurisdiction we were in, records were an exception to the hearsay rule. But you needed someone familiar with the creation and maintenance of the records to get them admitted. I attacked the witness's qualifications to get the records admitted and ended up getting the records excluded. I then made a motion for a directed verdict on the grounds they couldn't prove the case without the records, and I won. All because the opposing counsel complained that their witnesses had to go way out of their way to get records for the court. Story 8. I had a hearing where the opposing party offered an updated contract that my client supposedly signed. Except it was a horrible copy and barely readable. Then he assured the judge that the new contract was exactly the same as the old one, except for the party name at the top. The original contract was in his mom's name, the new one in his, and the date of the contract itself. He gave that assurance multiple times. After he exhausted himself saying how everything was the same, I then pointed out to the judge that half the provisions were different and that my client had never signed that form. The judge asked if we were really accusing him of forging my client's signature, since that's a serious accusation. I held up the guy's prior conviction for contract fraud and said, "I absolutely am, Your Honor." We won hands down. No further argument is needed. Story 9. A while back, I was prosecuting an illegal discharge of hazardous substances at a recycling facility. Specifically, the charge was for illegal storage and disposal of CRT Glass, which contains lead, cadmium, and a few other hazardous substances. To demonstrate that the owner had no idea that he was receiving CRT Glass, the defense attorney introduced shipping manifests that lacked the term CRT, monitors, or any other word that indicated that material. A close inspection of the manifests, however, indicated that the defense attorney had just Control+F the documents for certain key words, because what the manifests also demonstrated was that this facility, as well as 2 additional facilities owned by the defendant, had been accepting asbestos, hexavalent chromium, and various other hazardous substances that the facility was not authorized to take. That attorney literally handed us the case on a silver platter. Story 10. I represented a client who was defrauded into purchasing a bad business. The defendant was not willing to settle, and all settlement talks eventually halted. Also, the defendant's attorney was pretty slimy and told me they didn't have a lot of the records I was requesting because her computer crashed and had to be formatted. The defendant got a new attorney a year into the case, and her new attorney told me about all of these records his client had, several of which proved my case and were supposedly destroyed in the computer crash. His client was clearly not happy. A settlement was reached shortly after. Story 11. My wife got hit by a drunk driving teenager years ago. Parents have money and friends with the cops, so they get it hidden that their daughter was super drunk. She couldn't even stand up, according to some nurses who lived across the street and responded right away. Their insurance refuses to pay without evidence. The wife tells the lawyer to take it to court. In her deposition, the teenager freely admits she was drinking, says it totally changed her life. She couldn't believe she almost killed someone. She's never touched a drop since, and she's really sorry for all of this that her parents have done. The lawyer for the insurance company looks at the wife's lawyer and says, "We will give you a call tomorrow." Story 12. A barrister friend told me about a case observation she witnessed during her training. A guy was up for sex with a minor, and he adamantly insisted to his lawyer that his defense was that he had never even seen the girl, let alone met her. This is despite witnesses in the bar and incriminating CCTV footage showing someone who looked like him leaving the bar and going to his car in the parking lot. When he was questioned, he steadfastly stuck to his story. When the questioning ended, there was a pause, and he yelled at the judge, "There was no way I could have known she wasn't 16 when she sucked me off," literally blowing the whole case.